Today is April 1st, 2018. We're at the St. Francis Retreat Center in San Juan Bautista, California. Tonight, the Venerable Bhante Vimalaramsi is going to read from the Mahatanhasankaya number 38, The Greater Discourse on the Destruction of Craving.
Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Suwati in Jeta's Grove, Anathan Pendika's Park. Now on that occasion a pernicious view has arisen in a monk named Sati, son of a fisherman, thus: as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirths, not another. Now this is a Hindu view, and it has to do with the difference between reincarnation and rebirth. Now, this is a Hindu view. Reincarnation, they have a belief in a soul that continues on. And rebirth, when you get to a certain place, you start seeing individual consciousnesses, and you're seeing birth, death happening very, very quickly. And there's no soul attached to that. It's just conditions are right. Several monks, having heard about this, went to the monk Sati and asked him, "Friend Sati, is it true that such a pernicious view has arisen in you?" "Exactly so, friends. As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another." He'd been talking to the Brahmin priests in that area and got confused about it. Then those monks, desiring to detach him from that pernicious view, pressed and questioned and cross-questioned him. "Friend Sati, do not say so. Do not misrepresent the Blessed One. It is not good to misrepresent the Blessed One. The Blessed One would not speak thus. For in many ways the Blessed One has stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there is no origination of consciousness. Yet, although pressed and questioned and cross-questioned by those monks, in this way the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, was still obstinately adhered to the pernicious view and continued to insist upon it. Since the monks were unable to detach him from that pernicious view, they went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and told him all that had occurred, adding, "Venerable Sir, since we could not detach the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, from this pernicious view, we have reported this matter to the Blessed One." Then the Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus: "Come, monk, tell the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, in my name that the teacher calls him." "Yes, Venerable Sir," he replied. He went to the monk Sati and told him, "The teacher calls you, friend Sati." "Yes, friend," he replied, and he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, sat at one side. The Blessed One then asked him, "Sati, is it true that the following pernicious view has arisen in you?" As I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another. Exactly so, Venerable Sir, as I understand the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One, it is this same consciousness that runs and wanders through the rounds of rebirth, not another. What is that consciousness, Sati? Venerable Sir, it is that which speaks and feels and experiences here and there the results of good and bad actions. Misguided man, to whom have you ever known me to teach the Dhamma in that way? Misguided man, have I not stated in many ways consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there's no origination of consciousness? But you, misguided man, have misrepresented us by your wrong grasp and injured yourself and stored up much demerit. For this will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Monks, what do you think? Has this monk Sati, son of a fisherman, kindled even a spark of wisdom in this Dhamma and discipline? How could he, Venerable Sir, no, Venerable Sir? When this was said, the monk Sati, son of a fisherman, sat silent, dismayed, with shoulders drooping and head down, glum and without response. Then, knowing this, the Blessed One told him, Misguided man, you will be recognized by your pernicious view. I shall question the monks on this matter. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Monks, do you understand the Dhamma taught by me, as this monk Sati, son of a fisherman, does when he misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit? After a question like that, what do you think the answer would be? No, Venerable Sir. For in many discourses the Blessed One has stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there's no origination of consciousness. Good monks, it's good that you understand the Dhamma taught by me thus. For in many ways I have stated consciousness to be dependently arisen, since without a condition there's no origination of consciousness. I'll explain this in just a moment. But this monk Sati, son of a fisherman, misrepresents us by his wrong grasp and injures himself and stores up much demerit. For this will lead to the harm and suffering of this misguided man for a long time. Monks, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the eye and forms, it is reckoned as eye consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odors, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Just as a fire is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it burns. When fire burns dependent on logs, it is reckoned as a log fire. When fire burns dependent on branches, it is reckoned as a branch fire. When fire burns dependent on grass, it is reckoned as a grass fire. When fire burns dependent on cow dung, it is reckoned as a cow dung fire. When fire burns dependent on chaff, it is reckoned as a chaff fire. When fire burns dependent on rubbish, it is reckoned as a rubbish fire. So too, consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent on which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on the I and forms, it is reckoned as I consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the ear and sounds, it is reckoned as ear consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the nose and odors, it is reckoned as nose consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the tongue and flavors, it is reckoned as tongue consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on the body and tangibles, it is reckoned as body consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Now we have the general questionnaire on being. Monks, do you see this has come to be? This is the first noble truth. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see its origination occurs with that as nutriment? This is the second noble truth. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you see with the cessation of that nutriment what has come to be is subject to cessation? This is the third noble truth. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? Does its origination occur with that as nutriment? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, does doubt arise when one is uncertain thus? With the cessation of that nutriment is what has come to be subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? This has come to be. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, is doubt abandoned in one who sees as it actually is with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt here? Has this come to be? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt here? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, are you thus free from doubt here? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Now, the nutriment we're talking about is your attention. Okay, that's what you feed this with. And when the nutriment is not there, it fades away. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus? This has come to be. So now he's asking the monks about their direct experience. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus? Its origination occurs with that as nutriment. Excuse me. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, has it been seen well by you as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus? With the cessation of that nutriment, what has come to be is subject to cessation. Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, purified and bright as this view is, if you do not adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. Monks, there are these 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that already have come to be, and for the support of those about to come to be. What for? They are physical food as nutriment, gross or subtle, contact as the second, formations as the third, and consciousness as the fourth. Now, monks, these 4 kinds of nutriment have what as their source? What is their origin? From what are they born and produced? These 4 kinds of nutriment have craving as their source, craving as their origin. They are born and produced from craving. And this craving has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Craving has feeling as its source, feeling as its origin. It is born and produced from feeling. And this feeling has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Feeling has contact as its source, contact as its origin. It is born and produced from contact. And this contact has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Contact has the 6-fold base as its source. the sixfold base as its origin. They are born and produced from the sixfold base. And this sixfold base has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? The sixfold base has mentality, materiality as its source. Mentality, materiality as their origin. They are born and produced from mentality, materiality. And this mentality, materiality has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Mentality, materiality has consciousness as its source. Consciousness as its origin. It is born and produced from consciousness. And this consciousness has what as its source? What as its origin? From what is it born and produced? Consciousness has formations as its source. Formations as its origin. It is born and produced from formations. And these formations have what is their source? What is their origin? From what are they born and produced? Formations has ignorance as their source. Ignorance as their origin. They are born and produced from ignorance. So, with ignorance as condition,
formations come to be.
With formations as condition,
Consciousness comes to be.
with consciousness as condition,
Mentality, materiality comes to be.
with mentality, materiality as condition,
Sixfold base comes to be.
with the sixfold base as condition,
Contact comes to be.
with contact as condition,
Feeling comes to be.
with feeling as condition,
Craving comes to be.
with craving as condition,
Clinging comes to be.
with clinging as condition,
Habitual tendencies come to be.
with habitual tendency as condition,
Birth comes to be.
with birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair comes to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. David, can you get my blue book in the black thing right by the door? The reverse order questionnaire on arising. With birth as condition, aging and death comes to be, so it was said. Now, do aging and death have birth as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Aging and death and birth as condition, no, sir. Thus we take it in this case. With birth as condition, aging and death comes to be.
With habitual tendency as condition, birth comes to be, so it was said. Now, does birth have habitual tendency as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Birth has habitual tendencies as condition, no, sir. Thus we take it in this case. With habitual tendencies as condition, birth comes to be.
With clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be, so it was said. Now, does habitual tendency have clinging as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Habitual tendencies have clinging as condition, no, sir. Thus we take it in this case. With clinging as condition, habitual tendencies come to be.
one too fast. With clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be, so it was said. Oh, we just did that, didn't we? Next one. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be, so it was said. Does clinging have craving as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case? With feeling as condition, craving comes to be, so it was said. Does craving have feeling as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Craving as feeling as condition, thus we take it in this case. With feeling as condition, craving comes to be.
With contact as condition, feeling comes to be, so it was said. Does feeling have contact as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Feeling has contact as condition, thus we take it in this case. With contact as condition, feeling comes to be.
With the sixfold base as condition, contact comes to be, so it was said. Does contact have the sixfold base as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Contact has the sixfold base as condition, thus we take it in this case. With the sixfold base as condition, contact comes to be.
With mentality, materiality as condition, the sixfold base comes to be, so it was said. Now, does the sixfold base have mentality, materiality as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
The sixfold base has mentality, materiality as condition, thus we take it in this case. With mentality, materiality as condition, the sixfold base comes to be.
With consciousness as condition, mentality, materiality comes to be, so it was said. Now, does mentality, materiality have consciousness as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Mentality, materiality has consciousness as condition. Thus we take it in this case. With consciousness as condition, mentality, materiality comes to be.
With formations as condition, consciousness comes to be, so it was said. Now, does consciousness have formations as condition or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Consciousness has formations as condition, thus we take it in this case. With formations as condition, consciousness comes to be.
With ignorance as condition, formations come to be, so it was said. Now, do formations have ignorance as condition or not, or how do you take it in this case?
Formations have ignorance as condition, thus we take it in this case. With ignorance as condition, formations come to be.
Saying it out loud helps set it in your mind. Please repeat like everybody else. Good. So you say so, and I also say so. I say thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. That is, with ignorance as condition.
Formations come to be.
With formations as condition.
Consciousness comes to be.
With consciousness as condition.
Mentality, materiality comes to be.
With mentality, materiality as condition.
The sixfold base comes to be.
With the sixfold base as condition.
Contact comes to be.
With contact as condition. With feeling as condition, with craving as condition, with clinging as condition, with habitual tendency as condition, with birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of formation. With the cessation of formation comes the cessation of consciousness. With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of with the cessation of mentality, materiality comes the cessation of with the cessation of the sixfold base comes the cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving comes the cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging comes the cessation of with the cessation of habitual tendencies comes the cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. With the cessation of birth comes the cessation of aging and death, so it was said. Now, do aging and death cease with the cessation of birth or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Aging and death ceases with the cessation of birth. Thus, in this case, with the cessation of birth, the cessation of aging and death occurs.
With the cessation of habitual tendencies comes the cessation of birth, so it was said. Now, does birth cease with the cessation of habitual tendencies or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Birth ceases with the cessation of habitual tendencies. Thus, in this case, with the cessation of habitual tendencies, the cessation of birth.
With the cessation of clinging comes the cessation of habitual tendencies, so it was said. Now, do habitual tendencies cease with the cessation of clinging or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Habitual tendencies cease with the cessation of clinging. Thus, we take it in this case, with the cessation of clinging, the cessation of habitual tendencies occurs.
With the cessation of craving comes the cessation of clinging. So it was said, now, monks, does clinging cease with the cessation of craving or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Clinging ceases with the cessation of craving and also. Thus, we take it in this case, with the cessation of craving, the cessation of habitual.
With the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of craving, so it was said. Now, does craving cease with the cessation of feeling or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Craving ceases with the cessation of feeling and also. Thus, we take it in this case, with the cessation of feeling, the cessation of craving occurs.
With the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feeling, so it was said. Now, does feeling cease with the cessation of contact or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Feeling ceases with the cessation of contact or also. Thus, we take it in this case, with the cessation of contact, the cessation of feeling occurs.
With the cessation of the sixfold base comes the cessation of contact. So it was said, now, does contact cease with the cessation of the sixfold base or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Contact ceases with the cessation of the sixfold base, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of the sixfold base, the cessation of contact occurs.
With the cessation of mentality, materiality, comes the cessation of the sixfold base, so it was said. Now, does the sixfold base cease with the cessation of mentality, materiality, or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
The sixfold base ceases with the cessation of mentality, materiality, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case.
With the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of mentality, materiality, so it was said. Now, does mentality, materiality cease with the cessation of consciousness or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Mentality, materiality ceases with the cessation of consciousness, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of consciousness, the cessation of mentality, materiality.
With the cessation of formations comes the cessation of consciousness, so it was said. Now, does consciousness cease with the cessation of formations or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Consciousness ceases with the cessation of formations, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of formations, the cessation of consciousness occurs.
With the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of formation, so it was said. Now, do formations cease with the cessation of ignorance or not? Or how do you take it in this case?
Formation ceases with the cessation of ignorance, Venerable Sir. Thus we take it in this case. With the cessation of ignorance, the cessation of formation occurs.
Good, so you say thus, and I also say thus. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is the cessation. With the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of
Formations.
With the cessation of formations comes the cessation of
Consciousness.
With the cessation of consciousness, cessation of
Mentality, materiality.
With the cessation of mentality, materiality comes the cessation of
Sixfold base.
With the cessation of the sixfold base comes the cessation of
Contact.
With the cessation of contact comes the cessation of
Feeling.
With the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of
Craving.
With the cessation of craving comes the cessation of
Clinging.
With the cessation of clinging comes the cessation of
Habitual tendencies.
With the cessation of habitual tendency comes the cessation of
Birth.
With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such a cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you run back to the past thus? Were you in the past? Were you not in the past? What were you in the past? How were you in the past? Having been what did you become in the past? No, Venerable Sir. Why? Because you're being in the present, seeing the links of dependent origination and how this process works. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you run forward to the future thus? Shall we be in the future? Shall we not be in the future? What shall we be in the future? How shall we be in the future? Having been what shall we become in the future? No, same answer, because you're in the present seeing the process. And this is all impersonal. It's the impersonal process. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you be inwardly perplexed about the present thus? Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? The teacher is respected by us. We speak as we do out of respect for the teacher. No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? The recluse says this, and we speak thus at the bidding of the recluse. No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you acknowledge another teacher? No. Why? Because you are teaching yourself how this process works. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you return to the observance, tumultuous debates and auspicious signs of ordinary recluses and Brahmins, taking them as the core of the holy life? No, Venerable Sir. And that's one of the things that the Brahmins, they really like their fortune telling and that sort of thing. So they weren't happy when the Buddha said this sort of thing. Do you speak only of what you have known, seen, and understood for yourself? Yes, Venerable Sir. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with this Dhamma, which is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading to be experienced by the wise for themselves. My favorite part of this good qualities of the Dhamma is immediately effective. When you have a hindrance arise, you recognize it, you release it, you don't keep your attention on it, you relax. Right there, it's effective. You smile, you bring your attention back to your object of meditation and stay with your object of meditation. So this is immediately effective. I know many meditations that aren't. Some of them are so complicated and hard to understand, it can take years before you actually have confidence in what you're doing. But the first time you use 6 R's, it is immediately effective right then. You are starting to purify your mind. For it was with reference to this that it was said, monks, this Dhamma is visible here and now. You see it. It's immediately effective, inviting inspection. Check it out. See if the 6 R's really work. Onward leading to be experienced by the wise for themselves. Monks, the descent of the embryo takes place through the union of three things. Here there's a union of the mother and father, but the mother is not in season, and the coming being is not present. In this case, no descent of the embryo takes place. Here there's the union of the mother and father, and the mother is in season, but the coming being is not present. In this case, too, no descent of the embryo takes place. When there is the union of the mother and father, and the mother is in season and the coming being is present, through the union of these three things, the descent of the embryo takes place. The mother then carries the embryo in her womb for 9 or 10 months. 9 months is the sun calendar, 10 months is the moon calendar. With much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then at the end of 9 or 10 months, the mother gives birth with much anxiety as a heavy burden. Then when the child is born, she nourishes it with her own blood, for the mother's breast milk is called blood in the noble one's discipline. When he grows up and his faculties mature, the child plays at such games as toy plows, tipped cat somersaults, toy windmills, toy measures, toy carts, and toy bow and arrows. When he grows up and his faculties mature still further, the youth enjoys himself provided with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, with forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Sounds cognizable by the ear that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Odors cognizable by the nose that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Flavors cognizable by the tongue that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. Tangibles cognizable by the body that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and inviting lust. On seeing a form with the eye, he lusts after it if it's pleasing. He dislikes it if it's unpleasing. He abides with mindfulness of the body unestablished, with a limited mind. When we're talking about mindfulness of the body, that's a statement that is misunderstood, because we think of the body from here down. We don't consider this as part of the body. This is part of the mind, we think. But when it's talking about he abides with mindfulness of the body unestablished, that means that you're not seeing the craving that comes in and causes that tension and tightness in your head, in your mind. And that's why you have a limited mind. And he does not understand, as it actually is, the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom whereby these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Engaged as he is in favoring and opposing whatever he feels, whether pleasant or painful or neither pleasant nor painful, he delights in that feeling, welcomes it, and remains holding to it. As he does so, delight arises in him. Now, delight in feelings is craving. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be. With habitual tendency as condition, birth comes to be. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair comes to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. This, if you don't recognize that tension and tightness in your head, then you're going to get caught with all of these other links coming up. And that is the cause of suffering. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with mind. He lusts after it if it's pleasing. He dislikes it if it's unpleasing. Now, delight in feeling is craving. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With clinging as condition, habitual tendency comes to be. With habitual tendency as condition, birth comes to be. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair comes to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. So, if you have a feeling arise, and as soon as you see that feeling, you relax right then craving won't arise. And if craving won't arise, clinging won't arise. And if clinging won't arise, habitual tendency won't arise. When habitual tendency doesn't arise, birth of action doesn't arise. If birth of action doesn't arise, there is no sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, or despair. That is how powerful the 6 R's are. So using the 6 R's will take you. I can't promise because I don't have any students that have done it yet, but they will take you to Nibbana. They will take you to Arahatship. They will take you off of the wheel of samsara, which is a very, very desirable thing to have happen. You're incredibly lucky to be born at this time, so close to a Buddha. I mean, it's only 2,500 years away. And his teaching is in really good condition. It's not perfect, but it is in good condition and still leads to Nibbana when you practice it correctly. Okay. fingers are too dry. Okay. Here a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished, fully awakened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, awakened and blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its maras and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing. He reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. A householder or a householder's son, or one born in some other clan, hears the Dhamma. On hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. On possessing that faith, he considers thus: household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It's not easy while living in the home life to lead a holy life utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard and put on the yellow robe and go forth from the home life into homelessness. On a later occasion, abandoning a small or large fortune, abandoning a small or large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard and puts on the yellow robe and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. Having gone forth and possessing the monk's training and way of life, abandoning the killing of living beings, he abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, conscientious, merciful, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given, taking only what is given, expecting only what is given. By not stealing, he abides in purity. Abandoning in celibacy, he observes celibacy. This is for monks right now. Okay. Living apart, abandoning the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks truth, adheres to truth, is trustworthy and reliable, one who is no deceiver of the world. Abandoning malicious speech, he abstained from malicious speech. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide those people from these. Nor does he repeat to these people what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from those. Thus, he is one who reunites those who are divided, a promoter of friendship, who enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, a speaker of words that promote concord. Abandoning harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many and agreeable to many. Abandoning gossip, he abstains from gossip. He speaks at the right time, speaks what is fact, speaks on what is good, speaks on the Dhamma and the discipline. At the right time, he speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. He abstains from injuring seeds and plants. He practices eating only one meal a day, abstaining from eating at night and outside the proper time. He abstains from dancing, singing, music, and shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, smartening himself with scents, and embellishing himself with unguents. He abstains from high and luxurious couches. Now, it's high and luxurious couches. During the time of the Buddha, the rich people would have a space like this before there was the cushions and such that they would lay on. Underneath that, they would put protective animals like statues of elephants and other kinds of things as a protection, so they wouldn't have bad dreams and that sort of thing. Now, high and luxurious, they had pillows that they slept on. They had mattresses that they slept on that were actually very nice and very soft. If you sleep on a soft mattress, when you wake up, you're not very alert. You sleep too deeply. At home, I sleep on a mat that's that thick, and I'm very comfortable with that. And over the years, because the Buddha recommends that we sleep on the right-hand side, I can be wide awake on my back, and when I turn to my right side, I toss and turn for a good 5 or 10 seconds, and then I'm asleep. I sleep very soundly. And when my body starts to get a little bit achy, I start to wake up, and it's time to get up. And that works. It's been working for me for the last 35 years, so I think it works pretty well. He abstains from accepting gold and silver. He abstains from accepting raw grain. He abstains from accepting raw meat. Why? Because they have to be cooked before you can eat them. And it takes a lot of time to cook. So we accept food that's already cooked. When I was going out on alms round, when I was in Thailand, everybody put cooked food in a little plastic bag, and they would put it in my bowl. I guess it's because I was a tall American, but I have pretty good food karma. I always had enough food for 5 or 6 months. And sometimes I would have enough food for an entire monastery. There's one monastery that I stayed at. I went out for the king's birthday. I walked outside of the gate just like I did every morning, and I went no more than 15 or 20 feet, and I had enough food, so I was turning around going back. But the Thai people, they love their king so much, they always wanted to donate food to the Sangha, and they begged me to stay. So a man came up with a plastic bag, and there was a line of people, and I would just stand there and accept the food and dump it into the plastic bag. And before long, the plastic bag was full. And they got another one, and I was doing the same thing. And before long, somebody came along with a pickup truck, and we put all the food that was offered in the pickup truck. Now, fortunately, I was staying at a monastery that had orphans, and there were about 50 orphans, so I fed them. And there was 25 people that were disabled. They weren't able to work, and so I gave them the food too. And because of that, they really thought very highly of me at that monastery. They thought that was really great. But I was amazed at how much food was offered. And even when I would go out into the villages that were very poor, I would always come back with enough food for 5 monks. Always. So I'd come back and I had to have a bag that I was carrying or somebody else helping me carry the food. And we would just put it out, and then the monks could pick and choose what they wanted to eat. And they stopped going out on alms round because they didn't need to. I was giving them plenty of food. And these people were very poor. When I was in Burma, I went to this monastery that they didn't have any new clothing. They had clothing that had rips and tears in it, and they were wearing it every day, and some of them only had enough clothes for one person. So the other one would stay inside while this one went out and did whatever they were going to do. And they would give me their food, what they were going to eat for the day. And I'd have a lot, and they still wanted to give me their food. And I was honor-bound to accept it because you can't turn down a gift as a monk because it hurts their feelings. So when I got back, of course, I fed everybody that needed any feeding at the monastery, and then I would take the extra food and I would put it on a tray, and I took it back and gave it back to them. And I was very heavily criticized by the monks for doing that. And I didn't care. Yeah.
Why do you think that the common people were so enthusiastic about giving you food? Did you have a sort of existing relationship with them? Or were you...
I was a stranger.
Oh wow, so they didn't actually know you.
They didn't actually know me, and if they did, they couldn't speak to me because they didn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Burmese or Thai.
Did you check whether they had the same behavior to the other monks in the...
Not quite as much. It was because I was tall and I was a Westerner, and they thought that was extra special because, I came from America. And they have so much food there, and you have all this prosperity, and you have all this stuff, and you gave it up to come here, and they really liked that.
Oh, so it was sort of gratitude.
Oh yeah, and it was inspiring to them. So when I was collecting all this food, one of the things the Buddha said that you're supposed to do is whatever food you don't eat, you just throw it on the ground. And I couldn't do that. So I made sure everybody got enough food for the day. So, and when I left Burma, I was there for 2 years at one stretch. Altogether, it was over 3 years. When I went back to Malaysia, because I'd spent 2 years in Burma, all the Malaysians thought that I should have more food, and I would have tables full of food offered to me, and I would be the only monk there.
And were you, I remember you telling some very interesting and heartwarming stories of what you did in the hospitals in terms of it relating to sick people in the countries where you were.
Well, yeah, I was invited often to go to hospitals, and they wanted me to give them blessings, and I would start by radiating loving kindness, and they really appreciated that.
Yeah, so you created a relationship with the community in a way by doing that, because I guess that word would have circulated about this.
Well, it started to circulate, so I was doing it every day. And sometimes they would be in a room this size, and there would just be bed after bed after bed. And if I went into, not a private room, but I went into one of these dormitory rooms, sometimes it would take me 3 or 4 hours to get out of the dormitory room, because even the Muslims were were begging me to come over and hold their hand and radiate loving kindness. And they very much appreciated. Now, the Muslims in Malaysia don't particularly like Buddhists, but they gave that prejudice up when I came in. And they would get real happy because I would be radiating loving kindness to them. I don't care what religion they are. They're human beings. And that's our job. We're supposed to be loving and kind to all human beings, having compassion for them. So it was for about a year I did that. And then I decided to go other places. And I didn't go to the hospitals quite as often, but every now and then somebody would send me a picture of somebody that was sick. So what I did was I got a group of people together, and we would take that picture and look at that and start radiating loving kindness with 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 people. And it was amazing the healing that was happening because of that. So whenever I went out on alms round, I was only focusing on loving kindness. And sometimes I would go out with other monks, and they would be senior to me, so they were walking in front, and they wouldn't get any food. And then they put me in front, and we all got food. But it was because I was radiating loving kindness, and they were just thinking this and that. They weren't really doing the practice that we were supposed to be doing. So it was real interesting and real fun. And I spent 3 months at Boulder Creek at the Tangpulu Center. And I would go out for alms round there. And I always came. I had to have somebody else carrying the food, because I would have so much food that was given to me. And all of the monks there, they wouldn't go out on an alms round. They were afraid of it. And they very much appreciated, because people would once they knew that I was coming around every day, even if they weren't there, there would be somebody there that could offer the food and put it in my bowl.
When was this?
Boulder Creek.
When?
When? That was 1999. So, when I go to Indonesia, I'm almost afraid to go because they're going to be so generous with the food. It's going to be unbelievable. The last time I went, there was 100 people offering food to me. 100 people. And of course, they're not going to offer just a little bit. They're going to offer a lot. Wow. It's amazing.
So the word has certainly spread, obviously.
Well, in Indonesia especially. Some in Malaysia. But when I was constantly in Malaysia, that was back in the mid-90s, there was always so much food. It was... And part of the reason that I have this kind of merit was because I went to, when Usilananda first came to America, I started being his attendant. And the Burmese that were supporting him would come at night because they prepared all the food at night. And in the morning, then I prepared all the food and heated it up, and then I would offer it to Usilananda, and I did that every day. And I got to know him very, very well, and I knew what his favorite foods were, so sometimes I would go out and get his favorite foods and offer them to him. It was great being around him. I was there for 2 years. And I had my own teacher. I had a teacher that really knew a lot. And I'd been practicing meditation for a period of time, 6 or 7 years, something like that. And I didn't know anything about Buddhism. So I had my teacher, and it was hands-on teaching. It was really quite wonderful. And I would do something, and he said, "Well, you can't do that." "Oh, okay, show me what I need to do. I'm just a dumb American. I don't know anything." And I would try to offer him some water, and he would say, "You don't need to offer water. Monks can get water on their own." And again, I would say, "Okay, but I'm just a dumb American, so I'm offering everything. I might as well offer that too." It was a real interesting time because I got to ask him all kinds of Dhamma questions. And I got to find out more and more about the etiquette of being with monks.
And in terms of the actual practice itself, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is to look at the future and imagine if Trend really catches on, are we going to see people going through the streets of Berkeley giving food to other people? Are we going to see the adoption of Buddhist sort of habits and stuff, or will it be changed as a result of the environment?
We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
A fortune teller I am not. And I am spending a lot of time not in America. I'm spending time in other countries, and we're going to be setting up a university for monks.
Where?
Next year we're starting.
And where?
I can't remember the name of the town. I was to so many different places. And he wants me to be his teacher. He was a PhD in physics, so he was real familiar with all the colleges around, and he was setting up talks and that sort of thing. India.
Oh, okay.
And he set up, the first talk he set up for me, where there was 3,500 people there. And I went to a lot of the colleges, and I was teaching the people that were in the religious departments. And there was an awful lot of people that were teaching Goenka-style meditation, and they started changing over because they started seeing the relaxed step is a real thing, and when you start doing it, it's so they were getting real enthusiastic about that. The last talk I gave, there were 6,000 people there at least. I mean, how do you measure that? I mean, it was a huge area, and there was no space in between anybody. They were all real close together, and they were truly amazed.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that at the beginning of the trip.
Yeah.
And one of the thoughts I had afterwards was India has a terrible history of internecine conflict between different religious groups. And I was wondering what your sense was of the future of Trinh Buddhism if it becomes really popular. Will Islam or Veda or one of the other religions get antsy about it?
I don't care what their religion is. We treat them as human beings and how they want to be treated. And we show them a simple thing like keeping the precepts. And there's no religion that's against that. And I teach loving kindness, and all the religions really like that. So we're instead of teaching so much of mindfulness of breathing, we're teaching the Brahma Viharas. And they see that it works, and that starts changing their perspective of everybody else around them, and they start being more at ease and smiling. And I had a lot of Muslims coming and listening to what I had to say. And they liked that. I had Muslims coming to me when I went to Kyrgyzstan. That's right by Russia. And they really like the loving kindness. I'm going to go home and show my mother, those kind of enthusiasm. There'd be 3 or 4, but I wasn't trying to make them Buddhist. I don't care. And they asked me, when we get done with this, can we still do our prayers 5 times a day? And I said, I don't care. It's up to you. You're in charge of your own life. You want to add some loving kindness into those prayers? Good. So there's still going to be people that don't like it and that sort of thing. I mean, that's just the nature. I mean, even the Buddha had his problems, especially with the caste system. In the Sutta Nipata, there's a couple of suttas that really come down on the Brahmins. And this is not the way human beings should act. And I ran across some of that when I was in India, being with quote, untouchables, and go into a place to get some water, really, and they wouldn't serve because they were untouchables. And you could see the pride coming out. I'm better than you because I'm a Brahmin.
Wasn't there something?
Please forgive me because I would love so much to hear about the Origination.
Don't worry about it.
Sure.
That was rude. That wasn't polite. He abstained from accepting women and girls. He abstained from accepting men and women slaves. He abstained from accepting goats and sheep. Now, the part about women and girls is in India at the time of the Buddha, women were thought to be on the level or just below dogs. And if they got married and the husband died, they were kicked out of the family. And they didn't have any place to go. That's why we don't accept women and children, because we are women and girls at the monastery, because that's not a place for the women to go. And as I remember, what some of the women would do would be they would climb on the funeral pyre and they would set themselves on fire and die with the burning of the husband. But there's an interesting thing about this. When I was in India, I was being very careful, because I was with Sister Kema, to always let her give the talk first. And she'd talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. Then I would talk. And I would say that I would tell everyone that she was very well educated in Buddhism. She understood it very well. She is a great teacher. And to follow her lead. Now, no men would do that in India. But we want to set up a Sangha for women. The problem with the monks is women, if they have certain problems, they don't want to talk to monks about it. They're shy. How can we cut out half the population? We need to have bhikkhunis so that women can feel at ease and talking Dhamma things with other women. So it's a real important thing. What I'm doing right now is, as I had her go to a monastery where there was 10 bhikkhus, and she's teaching them Dhamma, and they're accepting it. They get really excited about it. So.
Where's that, in India?
Yeah. It's Mumbai. Okay. He abstains from accepting men and women slaves. He abstains from accepting goats and sheep. He abstains from accepting fowl and pigs. He abstains from accepting elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. The reason that they abstain from doing this is because somebody has to take care of them and somebody has to feed them, and we should be, as Sangha members, we should be either studying or practicing. He abstains from accepting fields and land. He abstains from going on errands and running messages. He abstains from buying and selling. He abstains from false weights, false measures, and false metals. He abstains from accepting bribes, deceiving, defrauding, and trickery. He abstains from wounding, murdering, binding, brigandage, plunder, and violence. He becomes content with robes to protect his body and alms food to maintain his stomach. And wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burden, so too the monk becomes content with robes to protect his body, mostly from flies and mosquitoes and things like that. With alms food to maintain his stomach, and wherever he goes he sets out taking only these with him. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue, he experiences within himself a bliss that is blameless. On seeing an eye with a form, he does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. That means that you guard the sense doors by not indulging in them. You see, it doesn't mean that you have to walk with your eyes closed, okay? That's dangerous in itself. You never know when you're going to run into something. But how you guard the doors of the sense faculties is by using the 6 R's and not getting involved in greed, wanting things. But that doesn't mean that you can't appreciate flowers or appreciate looking at an animal. You can. Just don't let your mind start thinking about this and that and go 1,000 miles away. When you look at something, you look at it. And when you're done looking, then you go on to something else. In Asia, there's a wrong idea of there's trying to be an overemphasis on getting caught by the 6 sense doors. And a lot of critical thought occurs because I like to look at flowers. There's nothing wrong with looking at flowers as long as I'm not thinking about something else. I'm with the flower that I'm looking at. I don't have any distractions. I don't have any craving arise. I don't have any desire for something else to be. So when I look at a flower, that's what I look at, and then, okay, enough, and go on. So when you get into jhana, it says that you become secluded from sensual pleasures. What does that mean? When you're sitting, that means that you close your eyes, you don't have the sensual pleasure of seeing things. Sounds come, they're just sounds. And you do that with all of the sense doors. You just allow them to be and stay with your object of meditation. Now, when you get up and you start walking, of course your eyes are going to be open, but don't be looking around, because you look around, that's where your mind goes. It's best to keep your eyes down and stay with your object of meditation. That way you're guarding the doors of the sense faculties. Okay? So you can be in jhana when you're walking around. You can have a lot of joy arise. You can be very comfortable and staying with your object of meditation. So when we're practicing the restraint of the sense faculties, we're actually talking about restraint of what's happening in mind and not getting over-involved with the sense faculty. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with mind. He does not grasp it of signs and features, since if he left one of these faculties unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of I want it, I like it, or I don't want it and I don't like it coming up. And the unwholesome is I am that. Possessing this noble restraint of the faculties, he experiences within himself a bliss that is unsullied. He becomes one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. Full awareness of what? What mind is doing while you're doing these activities. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue, this noble restraint of the faculties, and possessing this noble mindfulness and full awareness, he resorts to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. On returning from his alms round after his meal, he sits down, setting his body erect, and establishes mindfulness before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with a mind free from covetousness. That means thinking of other worldly things while you're sitting and trying to stay on your object.
So he said that he establishes mindfulness before him. So that's in the Satipatthana Sutta.
It sure is.
Yeah. I think it's, there it says in the forefront.
No, it says before him.
Okay. So how do you explain
This one, 27.
Be mindful.
Well, so before him.
Well, it's putting it in front of you.
It's just an odd phrase.
Yes, it is, and it's been translated in so many weird ways that it just doesn't make sense.
I know that. Right.
So you're putting mindfulness in front of you when you sit down and you start practicing.
But it can also be as a substitution. You don't have something else in front of you, so you're having this in front of you. You know?
Well, what does that mean?
Well, just like with everything else you were saying, you don't get carried away by something else.
Right.
You have this.
And now-
bring this in front of you, and you don't have a plate of
Where
food in front of you.
you
don't
put
have
your
a cell
attention
phone.
in that way.
You don't have something else in front of you.
That's how I would. I interpret
That's what
that.
it makes sense.
That it is in the front, the forward or the frontmost part of your activity,
Of your attention.
of your attention. Yeah. Okay. I just.
Okay. Abandoning covetousness and grief for the world, he abides with a mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with a mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will. Abandoning sloth and torpor, he abides free from sloth and torpor. Mindful and fully aware, he purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Abandoning restlessness and anxiety, he abides unagitated with a mind free, with a mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and anxiety. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. Having abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and abides in the first jhana. With the stilling of thinking and examining thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana. With the fading away of joy, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. Now, we're going to go to another book. That's not the right one. Okay, I was talking before about the 4 noble truths in each link. At Sawati, the monks as to those ascetics and Brahmins who do not understand these things. That is the first noble truth. I'll explain it again in a minute. The origin of these things, the second noble truth. The cessation of these things, third noble truth, and the way leading to the cessation of these things, fourth noble truth. What are those things they do not understand, whose origin they do not understand, whose cessation they do not understand, and the way leading to whose cessation they do not understand. They do not understand aging and death. First noble truth. Each of the links is a form of suffering because it arises. Its origin, its cessation, and way leading to its cessation. They do not understand birth. They do not understand habitual tendency. They do not understand clinging. They don't understand craving, feeling, context, the six sense bases, mentality, materiality, consciousness, and formations. Their origin, their cessation, their way leading to the cessation. These are the things they do not understand, whose origins they do not understand. These I do not consider to be ascetics among ascetics or Brahmins among Brahmins. And these venerable ones who do not understand, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, in this very life, enter and dwell in the goal of asceticism and the goal of Brahmanhood. Now what's this saying? It's saying if you don't understand how the links of dependent origination actually do occur, you're not going to attain Nibbana. But to those monks and Brahmins who understand these things, the origin, cessation, and way leading to the cessation, and understand what these are, those things they understand. They understand aging and death, its origin, cessation, and way leading to its cessation. It goes through the whole list again. These are the things that they understand, whose origin they understand, whose cessation they understand, and the way leading to whose cessation they understand. These I consider to be ascetics among ascetics, and Brahmins among Brahmins. And these venerable ones, by realizing it for themselves with direct knowledge, in this very life, enter and dwell in the goal of asceticism and the goal of Brahmanhood. So it says, when you understand how the links of dependent origination, which is something that I've been teaching you from the very beginning of this retreat, when you start understanding as it actually is, you see the impersonal nature of this whole process. And you've been teaching that to yourselves. I bring it up. Oh, you have five things. You have a body, you have feeling, you have perception, you have formations, you have thought, and you have consciousness. When a feeling arises, it's either pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. If you six are right then, craving will not arise. And if craving doesn't arise, clinging doesn't arise. So you start getting caught by your hindrances, and you're taking it personally. You're causing yourself an awful lot of suffering. And your mindfulness is not sharp enough to see how the process works. So when you start seeing movement and vibration happening, let's put it this way. When you first start doing the meditation, your mind is flip-flopping all over the place, right? And as you get to the second jhana, it's not quite as much. And as you get to the third jhana, it's not as much. And when you get to the fourth jhana, there's not much movement at all. And as you go into the arupa states, you're starting to get into vibration more. Okay, and the first arupa state is you see these vibrations as you go through the different Brahma Viharas. The vibrations become less and less and less until it's hard to tell whether it's really there or not. That's neither perception nor non-perception. But that's not nibbana. Okay? As these vibrations become more and more subtle, and you start seeing them more clearly, and you relax and let them be, and then come back to your object of meditation, eventually you're making such good merit by doing this. You're purifying your mind of that craving that keeps coming up. Then you will be able to see the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. So it's a real interesting phenomena that every time you use the 6 R's, you are purifying your mind. And when you get it and you do it so much it starts to become automatic, your mind is naturally tending towards the end result by itself. You can't make it come up. You can't want it to come up. It's going to happen on its own. Now here's an interesting sutta about the dependent origination. When I first started, I started thinking that on the night of the awakening, that's when the Buddha figured out all of the links of dependent origination and all of that, but that's not what happened. Monks, before my awakening, while I was still only a bodhisattva, not yet fully awakened, it occurred to me, alas, this world has fallen into trouble, in that it's born, ages, and dies. It passes away and is reborn, yet it does not understand the escape from suffering headed by aging and death. When will that escape be discerned from this suffering headed by aging and death? Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does aging and death come to be? By what is aging and death conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is birth, Aging and death comes to be. Aging and death has birth as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does birth come to be? By what is birth conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is habitual tendency, birth comes to be. Birth has habitual tendency as condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does habitual tendency come to be? By what is habitual tendency conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is clinging, habitual tendency comes to be. Habitual tendency has clinging as its condition. Then it occurred to me, when what exists does clinging come to be? By what is clinging conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is craving, clinging comes to be. Clinging has craving as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does craving come to be? By what is craving conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is feeling, craving comes to be. Craving has feeling as condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does feeling come to be? By what is feeling conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is contact, feeling comes to be. Feeling as contact as condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does contact come to be? By what is contact conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there are the 6 sense doors, contact comes to be. Contact has the 6 sense doors as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists do the 6 sense doors come to be? By what are the 6 sense doors conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is mentality, materiality, the 6 sense doors or 6 sense bases come to be. The 6 sense bases have mentality, materiality as condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does mentality, materiality come to be? By what is mentality, materiality conditioned? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is consciousness, mentality, materiality comes to be. Mentality, materiality has consciousness as conditioned. Now, the consciousness is the potential for the arising of it's a potential when you have one of the sense doors, and then that consciousness arises. So when we're talking about consciousness here, it is the potential for it to arise. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists does consciousness come to be? By what is consciousness conditioned? Then, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is formations or preparations, consciousness comes to be. Now, this is the potential for these things arising too. Consciousness has preparations as its condition. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what exists, do preparations come to be? By what is preparations conditioned? Then, monk, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there is ignorance, not seeing the Four Noble Truths, then when there is ignorance, preparations come to be. Preparations have ignorance as their condition. Thus, with ignorance as condition, preparations come to be. With preparations as condition, consciousness comes to be. And so on through the whole thing again. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Now, this was a major breakthrough. This is one of the reasons that the Buddha, when Ananda had just gone through fruition, and he had seen the links of dependent origination, to him it was very simple to understand. And he told that to the Buddha, and he got scolded. No, this is not easy to understand. Because it takes a Buddha to see it. And then he can explain it to us, and it's fairly easy to understand that way. But because of that one sutta, it makes all the monks afraid of doing much with dependent origination, because the Buddha said it's hard to understand. Mahasi Sayadaw, he wrote a book on dependent origination. And in the in the introduction, he said, this is really, really complicated, and it's really, really hard to understand. And he wrote that book in a way that's really, really hard to understand. But there's a practicalness that you will get to understand. I have had a few students that have just studied dependent origination and thought about it deeply and actually attained Nibbana that way without doing any meditation. And if you're a faith person, your faith in the Buddha and the teachings can be so strong, and you think about them deeply and you understand them, you can attain Nibbana through faith. But the easy way is through meditation. So, and when I was in Burma, I went by the monastery. This monk had died. But all the monks that were still at that monastery were teaching the links of dependent origination, and they had 50 or 75 people just reciting the links of dependent origination over and over, forwards, and the arising and the cessation, and they had it doing over and over. And when you start thinking deeply of how this process actually works, it works on a big scale and it works on a very fine scale. And when you realize that, you can attain Nibbana fairly easily. So the next part of this is talking about the cessation. I'll just read one for you that he uses, the Bhikkhu Bodhi uses a lot of dots, and it's real hard to do that while I'm reading. Then, monks, it occurred to me, when what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be? With the cessation of what does the cessation of aging and death come about? Then, monks, through careful attention, there took place in me a breakthrough by wisdom. When there's no birth, aging and death does not come to be. With the cessation of aging and death, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth comes the cessation of aging and death. And then he goes through this whole process again. I wish that Bhikkhu Bodhi hadn't found out about ... I dislike that so much that I took this entire book and I took out ... all the way through. Every sutta. It took me about 4 months to do it. And the thing, so many people are really caught up in reading, and this is an oral tradition, so you have to have the repetition. Tomorrow night, I'm going to give you a sutta that has all of the repetition in it. This is a very powerful sutta. A lot of people have gained big benefit from listening. But especially in this country with its computers and all of this sort of thing, your mind starts wandering and you don't pay attention. You're not gonna let it sink into your mind. See, there's a difference between reading and listening. Listening goes to one part of your mind, reading goes to another. So just reading the suttas yourself isn't as effective as listening. So tomorrow night, when you start listening, I don't want your mind to start thinking about, this is boring, and start ho-humming and thinking about other things. Well, I wish I could hurry up and get done with this. No, you're hurting yourself when you do that. You need to listen to this very attentively, to all of the suttas. The Buddha says, listen and attend closely to what I say. And then he goes through and because it is the oral tradition, he's going to repeat it a lot. And that's the way you really start to learn it. Now, I've been talking here 5 years, right? And every year I say, you need to memorize this sutta. How many of you have done that? See, I can say that in Malaysia, and they're so enthusiastic that they'll do it. They will memorize it. And what's the advantage of memorizing a sutta that has so much repetition in it? Because it comes to mind very easily when you're talking Dhamma. And you'll start using some of the phrases, and you'll start using some of the understanding that you get because you memorized it. Oh, but that's too much work.
repeat that sutta for you? Because I know I was talking to him and he's got the books and he's so enthusiastic. He's
Yeah, and what he wanted to do is read it to me. He didn't memorize it. Not quite the same. But I do have some students in Indonesia that are going to be coming here. Not here, they're going to be coming to Missouri, that have memorized it. So it's a real good thing. There's actually 4 suttas that I highly recommend that you memorize, and one of them is what I just got through reading. The destruction of craving. It's not hard to memorize things. You just have to repeat it out loud over and over again. And you might do it 3 or 4 times in a day. You'd be surprised in a week how much you have memorized. But the advantage is that you're carrying that with you all the time. So you'll have a tendency to look more closely at how the links of dependent origination work and how all of these different things become impersonal. You'll start to see it, and you'll start to see it in everything. And there's real relief in that. So it's a good thing. Don't be lazy. Well, I don't have time for that. I've got too many things to do. If it's not your priority, you're not going to do it.
Which one? The fourth sutta you were saying that is good to learn. To memorize.
The Satipatthana Sutta?
What? Sorry.
Satipatthana Sutta, and right view, number 9. I mean, if you memorize these, it'll turn you into a great teacher.
Okay, what's 3 and 4 then?
I just got through saying it.
Oh, I thought you said
9.
Number 10, number 9.
You said there were 4.
Okay, 4 seconds.
Okay. Number 148, 38, 10, and 9.
good.
That way, if you memorize that, then we can go.
It's a shame that nobody's converted it to an image, because the people are more visual rather than auditory.
No, they're more lazy.
So how many monks do you know that have committed those 4 suttas to memory?
Around 20.
How many monks do you know in total?
Many, 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 many.
And they're all called Bhante.
Yeah, they are. We don't even pay attention to each other's real name most of the time. It doesn't matter. We can get into some great conversations and never know what the name of the monk was you were talking to. and they all look the same. In Burma, thousands. Not those 4 particular suttas, but there are many thousands that have memorized 12 books this size. 12 books. And they take a test on it. And they have to do it before they're 28 years old. Usilananda, when he took the test, the way they give the oral part of the test is they just flip open to a page and they say, well, this is this sutta, and they'll read a line, and then they have to continue. If you make 6 mistakes, you fail. So it's pretty rigid testing. He didn't make any mistakes. And that's only half of it. The other half is a written test. It takes about 8 hours to complete this written test. And it's on the importance of doing Pali, and they have some other questions in there. Usilananda wrote his whole answer in Pali. And he was number 1 in the country that year. I have other friends that have done the same thing. But 12 books, that's not much. It's the ones that do the whole Tipitaka. I did have the great honor of meeting the Mingun Sayadaw, who was at the 6th Buddhist Council, and he'd memorized and took tests and passed 90%. And his test, in college, I had to take this 4-hour test. It was such a killer. His was 10 hours a day, 30 days in a row, and got 90% correct. Yeah. Anyway, he was the chief answering person for Mahasi Sayadaw would have the questions, and then he would answer them. I had the chance to hang out with him for a while. Unfortunately, he didn't speak English, so I had to go through a translator. God knows whether what I heard was correct or not. Who knows? But I got to ask him a lot of questions. And one of the things in this country that's real important is getting to access concentration, upachara samadhi, and kanika samadhi, moment-to-moment concentration. And I asked him directly, where is that in the suttas? And he said, it's not in the suttas, it is in the commentary. We have commentaries, and it's one person's opinion of what he thinks the Buddha is talking about. But we also have sub-commentaries where somebody will write and correct the commentary. Okay, the commentary is, the Visuddhimagga is a commentary. But there are monks that have written sub-commentaries showing exactly where that's not right. Unfortunately, it's all in Burmese script. There's a huge amount of information that is not available to people that speak English only. And that makes it kind of a difficult thing to be able to be successful with your meditation if you don't have a good commentary like Bhikkhu Bodhi. It was really exciting when he released this. And I talked with Usil Ananda about it and some other monks, and they were real satisfied with the way he did it. He upgraded the language, and the people that wrote the Pali Text Society versions of the different Middle Link sayings or whatever, they were actually Christians, and they were Pali, I can't say that they were scholars, but they got real interested in doing translation. And then they would ask a monk about a phrase, and he might have been educated or he might not have been. So some of the definitions and the ways that they did the translation can be not as accurate as it could be. So when Bhikkhu Bodhi came out, I got exceptionally excited about this. Somebody gave me the copy of it. It was like, yeah, now I have something that I can read and understand. It's not old English. It's not old language that's not real popular. So you don't really know some of the things that they're talking about.
Didn't he pick up a lot of Mahatanhasankaya's definitions?
Mostly it was Nyanamoli.
Not
Yeah. He was quite a guy.
Oh, yeah.
He was only a monk for 10 years. And he has language was really easy for him.
But he didn't go back through the Pali and did he translate every single word anew?
Well,
Study each
what he tried to do was make a one-word translation from the Pali to the English. And he did a huge amount of work with that. And that's what Bhikkhu Bodhi used, but he didn't necessarily go along with some of his translations, so that he changed some of the stuff too.
I'd like to see a list of your sort of 10 wish lists, if you could change 10 key words that Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote, such as
Concentration is one.
samadhi, of course, it's the
Right.
one for many, many monks.
Right.
But, I mean, other ones. You know, is mindfulness the very best word for sati? I mean, I'd like to see that sometime happen.
There's a list in your book, so there's a glossary of this, but it may not be the perfect list you're looking for.
I mean, part of the problem is these things were translated in the 1800s, and a lot of these
Yeah,
these
it's old
key
English.
words have lived on
Yeah.
since then, and people know better now, but these words still live on. So, I mean, the value in what you're teaching us is the meaning
Yeah.
behind it, and that's
Because the English didn't necessarily know the meaning if they were doing the translation.
Right.
But it's surprising in some ways that no big English universities picked it up and redone it in modern language.
Well, there's a Pali to English dictionary that this woman is working on. And it's pretty good. It really is.
And what was the Buddhist
I think there's only 2 volumes of it, so it's not the whole,
Not the whole thing, yeah.
yeah.
What was the group you were talking about who has a huge scan of untranslated stuff?
Burmese.
Burmese, yeah.
Boy, I'd love to have some of that stuff translated.
Yeah. But unfortunately, their sort of political trajectory has made it unlikely that they get translated. Yes?
Well, I can go into Burma and come out with the commentaries, but I don't read Burmese.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is the name of the lady who wrote the Pali dictionary? How do you
I don't remember her name right off. Write an email and I'll get it to you. But it's pretty good. It really is. And it's a book that's this size. I mean, 2 books that are very big. It's actually big books. So. Why don't we share some merit? May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May it all protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.